I'm Daniel Levine, and this is the Bio Report. The regulatory pathway for biosimilars is still a work in progress at the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, but around the world, the industry is growing as regulators have resolved issues that remain obstacles in the United States. We spoke to Amit Munshi, CEO of Epirus Biopharmaceuticals, about the opportunities in emerging and developed markets, his company's strategic approach, and when we'll see a vibrant biosimilars industry in the United States. Amit, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Can you start with a brief overview of Epirus, which many of our listeners may not be familiar with?
Sure, absolutely. Epirus is a 2.5-year-old company. Was originally venture-backed and now is a publicly traded company. We are focused exclusively on the development and commercialization of biosimilars, predominantly in ex-U.S. markets. Our lead program is BOW015. It's a biosimilar to Remicade or Infliximab. And I'd be happy to talk more about that program as we go through this conversation.
Epirus became a public company in July through a reverse merger with Zalicus. The company raised $36 million through a private financing around that time. Given the robust IPO market we've had, why did you decide to go public in this way?
Thank you for bringing that question forward. It's an important question. It was an important part of our strategy to think about how to move the company toward the public markets. When Tom Shea, our CFO, and I looked at the public markets back in March and April, the relatively high valuations in the marketplace made us a little bit nervous about what the market would look like 6 months from then. And by the time we were ready, would the market still be in place? Would they still be robust, et cetera? So we decided to take a slightly alternative pathway in merging with Zalicus, and it really gave us three things. He gave us an immediate public listing with an existing shelf or an S3 offering in place. Number two, it gave us access to cash that was on the Zalicus balance sheet, and we closed at somewhere north of $12 million in cash on the Zalicus balance sheet, in addition to the funds that we raised. And third, Zalicus had recently completed a broad rheumatoid arthritis trial in Eastern Europe and had a broad database of patients and physicians that could help us accelerate our European clinical program. So we thought there was a small strategic rationale and a larger, sort of broader financial rationale to go this route as opposed to a traditional IPO.
So you've won approval in India for your first biosimilar, Infliximab, a Remicade biosimilar for the treatment of rheumatoid arthritis. What other markets are you targeting, and when might you expect to be in them?
Yeah, so we have initial market approval in India. We anticipate launching in India late in the fourth quarter, early first quarter. And we believe that package, which combines a robust double-blind, active control phase 3 trial in India with a phase 1 program that we completed in the UK, is sufficient for a broad range of markets around the world, including multiple Latin American markets, Southeast Asian markets, North Africa, et cetera. And we anticipate filing in those markets throughout the next year.
So what's your strategy in terms of targeting markets? Are you focusing on emerging markets, or are the real opportunities going to be in the developed markets like the United States and Europe?
Yeah, we see we sort of break out the world into three buckets. That's clearly in scope for us as a company. Bucket number one is emerging markets, or what we call accessible emerging markets. So these are markets that will have a robust platform for biosimilars, have already approved multiple biosimilars. Governments in these markets are very actively engaged in getting these biosimilars approved and making them available to the patient population. These are markets like Southeast Asia, most of Latin America, India, South Africa, etc. And that's our initial target focus as a company. Simultaneous to that, there's a second group of countries that we're targeting, and these are countries that we call local production markets. These are markets like China, Brazil, Russia that either have a strong preference for or a legal mandate for local production. In these markets, we transfer technology, manufacturing technology into those markets in order to enable market entrance. And we're currently processing partnerships in both Brazil and China. And then finally, we're looking to Europe, and we've been in active conversations with regulators and partners about crafting a European strategy. And for now, we are putting the U.S. on a bit of a back burner and waiting to see how the regulatory process works out. As you'll appreciate, as a small company, we can do anything, but we really can't do everything. So we've chosen to remain focused on those markets that have viable regulatory frameworks. And the three buckets I just mentioned, the accessible emerging markets, the local production markets, and eventually Europe as core to our strategy.
Well, how does pricing in emerging markets compare to the pricing of biologics in general, and what kind of discounts are you expecting to be selling biosimilars for in more developed markets?
Sure. Let me talk about the innovator pricing for a moment. There's a very broad range of pricing, even within Europe, for example, where you have some countries that where the innovator product is selling 30 to 40% higher than other countries, even within Europe. So there's a broad range globally in terms of where these products are priced. As a whole, the innovator companies have priced their products in emerging markets at or near European prices, or at the low end of the European pricing range. So that's sort of the range of the innovator. The discounts we can expect from there will range from 20% to 40% is our initial guess. And again, it'll depend on markets. It'll depend on government tendering situations. It'll depend on the competitive landscape. So it's really a market-by-market decision as opposed to sort of a pricing strategy globally. You know, the one thing you have to, if you take a step back and think about the global landscape, there is really very little harmonization on overall market entry strategies and overall regulatory planning for the globe. You really have to think about region by region, country by country. So we sort of take it as we take it down to the country level. We work closely with our partners in those countries to ascertain both regulatory strategy, access to government tenders, and pricing.
So what does the pipeline look like behind infliximab?
So behind infliximab, we have a robust pipeline of two additional programs that are moving through the clinic. The first is a biosimilar to Humira or adalimumab, and second is a biosimilar to Avastin or bevacizumab. And those programs are proceeding in a manner that would put them into the marketplace near the time of patent expiry in the markets that we're choosing to compete in.
And have those been identified externally, or?
You mean the markets?
Yeah.
Yeah, the markets are the ones I just mentioned, which is essentially the ex-US market.
So we've seen a number of the biggest biotechs enter into alliances to produce biosimilars, including Amgen and Biogen and Celgene. How does the company expect to compete, particularly when you're not only up against the branded product, but possibly multiple biosimilars that come from big-name players?
Sure. When you think about those alliances, you think about what does Amgen buy when they enter into a relationship with Actavis, for example. It's really U.S. commercial distribution. Amgen has all the internal capabilities to make their own products and all the expertise and all the internal knowledge to do this correctly, as does a Pfizer, for example. And some companies have chosen to leverage partnerships like Samsung and Biogen. Some companies have chosen to go alone, like Pfizer. We use a hybrid strategy where we do all the internal development work ourselves, and then we use partners on the commercial side in multiple markets around the world, where these partners have local expertise in their specific markets. So while we don't have one overarching partnership, we have felt that given the fragmentation of the global market, it's far better to find local partnerships in each individual market. And so we have a partnership that's in the works in China, a partnership that's in the works in Brazil. We have a partnership that's in play in India and Southeast Asia and other markets. So we've got multiple partnerships with folks that have actual regional expertise as opposed to one overarching partnership. So we think that's a much more practical way of putting products in the marketplace and taking advantage of local knowledge, local relationships, local know-how on the regulatory side.
Well, the naming of biosimilars remains a controversial and unresolved topic. Last week, a group of medical associations sent a letter to the FDA calling for different names for biosimilars and reference products. This is seen as an important issue as doctors may be less inclined to substitute a biosimilar for a branded alternative if the non-proprietary names are different. How important an issue is naming to the success of biosimilars, and what's the case for a single non-proprietary name for both a branded product and its biosimilar?
The naming question is an important question. I will put two twists on that question or response to that question. Number one is that this is a U.S. specific issue. Outside the United States, biosimilars have already been approved. They've already taken on the exact same generic name as the innovator. Patients have been treated for close to a decade with biosimilars, including erythropoietin, the filgrastim products, human growth hormone, insulin. Dozens of these products have been approved around the world, including places like Japan and Europe. And patients have been treated, again, like I said, for close to a decade, with no additional adverse events or nothing untoward that is seemingly being pointed to the United States as major risk. So this is clearly a U.S. phenomenon where folks are worried about the safety of these products. They're worried about the naming conventions of these products. Outside the United States, this is a non-issue. As is the issue of substitutability, where in most markets around the world, these products are deemed to be fully substitutable to each other. So first, I'd like to just categorize this as a specific U.S.-only problem. Number two is it's important to understand that there are product categories in the biologics that have slightly different names, but are widely seen as being completely substitutable for each other. And I'll point to the EPO market in Europe for a moment. We have EPO Alpha, which was the original Amgen and then J&J product. You have EPO Beta from Roche. And then subsequently you had an EPO Delta, an EPO Omega, and several other EPOs. And then again, biosimilars to EPO Alpha and EPO Beta. And these products were widely substitutable to each other, despite the fact that they had slightly different names. So personally, I believe that this will all shake out and people will realize that these products have been used on the market for quite some time, and the new versions of these more complex monoclonal antibodies, once they get enough momentum in the marketplace, enough experience, I think people will realize that substitutability is not an issue and naming is not an issue. So I think this is a U.S.-centric problem. When you look outside the United States, these problems seem to evaporate pretty quickly.
Well, still, are you concerned about the impact how this gets resolved could have on the biosimilar industry?
I think it may affect how the U.S. Adoption occurs. I think U.S. adoption is likely to be, my personal opinion, is likely to be slow in any case, whether you have the same name or, if you have a etanercept alpha or an etanercept beta or a slightly different derivation of the name etanercept. I think or you got the original generic name of etanercept. I think the adoption rates are likely to be slower in the United States than the rest of the world anyway. And it's a function of the fact that we don't have the single payer system, and we don't have the same cost mechanisms in place that the rest of the world does. So, I think the adoption is going to be slow, whether you have a single naming convention or multiple naming conventions. I think the U.S. is going to be a slow adopter of biosimilars.
Well, it's been more than 4 years since the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act passed. That empowered the FDA to create an abbreviated pathway for biosimilars, but the agency has yet to establish a clear pathway. What do you see as the biggest issues that need to be resolved, and when do you think we'll have a vibrant biosimilars market in the United States?
We, as a company focused largely outside the United States, we of course always have one eye towards the United States, but our focus is again predominantly ex-US. I will tell you that I think the FDA will eventually get into the same place as other regulatory agencies in the world that have been approving biosimilars for quite some time, the European agencies, et cetera, and take a much more pragmatic view on getting these products approved. I can't talk to the political underpinnings, or I won't. I don't think I need to reflect on the political underpinnings that have led to a 4-year delay in getting these guidelines into place. But suffice to say, there's a lot of conflicting priorities between the major pharma companies and biotech companies that have a lot of products coming off patent and have a lot to lose, and large companies that are mobilizing into the biosimilar space. So it's a difficult political environment. I'm not going to talk specifically about why the FDA is or is not fast or is not pragmatic. I do believe that over time, the FDA will come to the exact same place that most European regulators have been, which is a much more pragmatic approach to getting these products approved.
Amit Munshi, CEO of Epirus Biopharmaceuticals. Amit, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you again for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening. The Bio Report is a production of the Levine Media Group. To automatically download this podcast each week, subscribe to our RSS feed or through iTunes or other podcast manager. To join our mailing list, go to levinemediagroup.com. We'd love to hear from you. If you want to drop us a line or are interested in sponsoring this podcast, send an email to danny@levinemediagroup.com. Special thanks to Jonah Levine, who composed our theme music, and the Jonah Levine Collective, which performs it.